Geeks! I know I said I would hang up Boris's wig, but I have one last hurrah for you. As you all know, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson resigned, and now his successor is down to 2 candidates. Liz Truss, who's the British Foreign Secretary, which is like our version of Secretary of State, and Rishi Sunak, who's the former Chancellor of the Exchequer, which is kind of like our Treasury Secretary. And so to help our friends across the pond, I figured I'd dig up their Hinge profiles to help them make a choice. My name is Liz. My hair is naturally blonde. I like long walks on the beach, and I believe we should cut taxes and legalize cannabis. My name is Rishi. I believe I have great hair. I like a good home-cooked meal. I don't want to cut taxes. I don't have any working-class friends, and I have been accused of being a so-called mansplainer. Meanwhile, over at the British Parliament, mission largely accomplished. For now, I want to thank all my friends and colleagues, the staff at Downing Street, my family, the British public, everybody here, and hasta la vista, baby. Okay, Boris, you're no Arnold Schwarzenegger, but you keep at it and maybe you'll get there. We got a lot to cover today. We're going to talk about Nancy Pelosi's possible trip to Taiwan, the monkeypox health emergency, the latest with Ukraine and Russia, Myanmar killing pro-democracy activists, and fighting for a free Cuba a year after their mass protests. Before we start though, please hit that subscribe button below, click the notification bell, and like this video. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi might visit Taiwan in August, and now everyone has their panties in a twist. That is a lovely image in case you didn't know what I was talking about. She was supposed to travel there in April, but she postponed her trip for health reasons. And now she might be going in August, which she hasn't confirmed, but if that's true, it would be a big deal. As you geeks know, Taiwan is a sensitive topic for the US-China relationship. Taiwan is an island off the coast of China, and it's a self-governed democracy. The Chinese regime believes that Taiwan is Chinese territory, and that one day the two will reunify. Basically, Taiwan thinks the Chinese regime is nuts. The United States sells defensive arms and military equipment to Taiwan, but we don't recognize Taiwan as the real China. And over the last 2 years, but especially over the last few months, China's rhetoric toward Taiwan has become more dangerous, and China has stepped up its military activity near Taiwan's airspace. Especially given the Ukraine war and how Russia invaded its neighbor, many now fear that China will do the same thing and invade Taiwan. And now in walks Nancy Pelosi. She has always looked to poke the Chinese regime in the eye, and I gotta tell ya, I'm here for it. She visited Tiananmen Square 2 years after the 1989 massacre there took place, and she was the first to call for a boycott of the Beijing Olympics this year. But a visit to Taiwan would really shake things up. China has repeatedly warned against this trip and has also threatened to respond to it with military action. So the Pentagon has now apparently planned to send fighter jets and warships to protect her if she goes. And Taiwan has been conducting air raid drills and military defense exercises. So safe to say things there are a little tense. President Biden, who by the way is very supportive of Taiwan, said that the military thinks the trip is not a good idea. And some military experts say her trip could really endanger things, while others think she should go. I asked the geeks what you all thought, and 71% of you think she should visit Taiwan. If she does, she would be the highest-ranking US politician to travel there in 25 years. Here's my view. Normally, I would say that she should go, especially if the visit promised to be productive for the US and Taiwan. That being said, this comes at especially high tensions in the region and in the US-China relationship. However, other governments should not be telling our politicians where they can and can't travel. So whatever the situation, it's now too late for her not to go, because she can't be seen as bending to the Chinese regime's threats. At the end of the day, I think it's up to the Taiwanese to decide if they're okay with the risk. And so far, it looks like they want her to come because they don't want Beijing to win at their intimidation tactics. Safe travels, Nancy. Wow, look at that. The World Health Organization finally declared monkeypox as a public health emergency of international concern. And it only took, a few months. I want to explain what this means and also break down some myths for you. But before I do, you should know that I am not a medical expert and you should absolutely visit the CDC's website to learn more. But I do my homework so you don't have to. Monkeypox is a virus that's in the same family as smallpox. It has nothing to do with the chickenpox, and it doesn't actually come from monkeys. It was just first detected in monkeys in the 1950s. This outbreak started in the UK in May, and the first case detected was in someone who had traveled to Nigeria. Monkeypox is endemic in parts of Africa, but over the last 3 months, 16,000 cases have been recorded across 75 countries. And right now, the US currently has the greatest number of known monkeypox cases, with over 3,400 active cases. The WHO's declaration means they believe the threat posed by this virus requires a coordinated international response to prevent it from becoming a pandemic. So it's like raising a red flag to push countries to take steps to stop and prevent the spread by educating people, identifying and treating it early, and having test kits and vaccines on the ready. Luckily, a vaccine already existed, and the US just announced it would be distributing 800,000 doses here. Although most of the cases in this outbreak have been in men who have sex with men, this is not a disease that discriminates, so don't you start discriminating either. The last thing the gay community needs is to be stigmatized, especially for a disease that can spread among any people. Repeat after me. Anyone can catch this virus. Now that I've scared the shit out of you, I'm happy to share that the CDC says the risk of contracting it is low right now, which is great, and I am optimistic that they'll stop the spread since it's early enough. But if I were you, maybe don't rub up against a random sweaty person at a club until this thing is under control. A lot happening in Ukraine this week. Russia is expanding its aggression, but Ukraine is making some gains. Russia's been striking the cities of Kherson, Mykolaiv, and Odessa, and they've been destroying things like bridges and roads and houses and restaurants. Ukraine has been successful, though, in freeing many villages that Russia had previously seized, and experts say it's due to the military equipment we've provided. On Ukraine's grain exports, a joint coordination center was set up in Turkey that will monitor shipments of grain out of Ukraine's besieged ports and through the Black Sea, so that's good news. Meanwhile, Russia is cutting natural gas exports to Germany and other European countries, so natural gas prices in Europe jumped this week. Not good news. Russia says they did this because of technical difficulties, but Europe says that's a lie and that Russia is using its gas exports as a weapon against Europe. So now the EU has asked member states to cut gas use by 15%, and Germany is rushing to build terminals so it can receive natural gas from the US and Qatar. In other news, Russia announced it would be leaving the International Space Station once it has built its own, which is sad because it'll end over 2 decades of space cooperation. Finally, Secretary of State Tony Blinken announced that the US gave Russia a substantial proposal to release basketball star Brittany Griner and former Marine Paul Whelan from Russia. Media reports say the deal includes a prisoner swap for convicted illegal arms trafficker Victor Bout, which if true would be a big deal, because we don't like to encourage hostage-taking by offering prisoner swaps. And also, Bout is behind the worst crimes and atrocities all over the world. But some say he's out of the game by now and would have likely gotten out of prison early anyway, so perhaps this was the right deal to make. We'll do a poll and you can have your say. That's it for our Ukraine and Russia update. Please don't forget about Ukraine, since you caring about it and standing in solidarity can help end this war. For the first time in 50 years, Myanmar's illegitimate government carried out arbitrary executions of 4 democracy activists. One of the prisoners was a hip-hop star who used his lyrics to call for democracy. He then became a lawmaker and was killed simply for joining the resistance after last year's military coup. Another one of the prisoners has been fighting for democracy and against the country's military junta since the 1980s. He's considered to be one of the pioneers of Myanmar's pro-democracy movement. The UN and Cambodia had pleaded with Myanmar not to carry out the executions, but they went ahead anyway. Since last year's military coup, almost 15,000 people have been arrested and over 2,100 have been killed by the military. The US condemned these executions and had tried to push China, which is a longtime ally of Myanmar's military, to pressure them to improve its treatment of its citizens. Kinda ironic when you're asking a human rights abuser to fight for human rights in another country. Anyway, China's foreign ministry spokesperson said that they always uphold the principle of non-interference in other countries' internal affairs. So I guess that was a no. The reason this is so bad is because it's not just cruel and criminal, but it's also meant to instill fear in Myanmar citizens so that they don't speak up or fight for democracy. For this reason, Myanmar's military is on my shit list this week. A year ago, July 11 to be exact, hundreds of thousands of Cuban citizens spontaneously hit the streets to peacefully protest their repressive and corrupt government. Nearly 1,400 people were detained simply for demonstrating, and about half of these Cubans, some under 18, remain behind bars. Some say the crackdown had a chilling effect on the protest movement, but many people are still fighting for a free Cuba. So to commemorate the anniversary of these protests, I wanted to share the story of an amazing dissident art movement in Cuba, and also a Cuban democracy activist and art historian named Carolina Barrero. In 2018, the Cuban government passed a censorship law that prohibited artists, musicians, and performers from doing their work in public or private without prior government approval. So a group of artists, journalists, and intellectuals created the San Isidro and the 27N movements to protest this law. And many argue that this movement helped fuel last year's protests because Cubans saw that they could voice themselves against the Cuban government. Following this law and during last year's crackdown, many artists of all kinds were imprisoned or forced to flee the country. When Carolina joined the peaceful protests last year, she was detained and held under house arrest for months. She was then detained again twice in January of this year while peacefully protesting the political prisoners who remained detained. But the last time she was told to leave the country or the mothers of prisoners with whom she protested would be punished. So she left, but even in exile, she continues to resist loudly, and she shows us how artists in Cuba play an important role in effecting change there. You can do your part by supporting these artists and calling for the release of political prisoners in Cuba with the hashtag #SOSCuba. Follow Carolina Barrero and 27N for more. Geeks, before you go, I wanted to make sure you didn't miss the news about giant invasive snails the size of your hand that are taking over Florida. Okay, that might be a slight exaggeration, but the reality is that giant African land snails have been multiplying in a county in Florida, which is now under quarantine because of them. They actually pose a serious health hazard to humans because they carry a parasite called rat lungworm that can cause meningitis. These things can lay up to 2,500 eggs per year, and it'll take about 3 years to get rid of them. Experts think someone once brought one of these in as a pet, and it's illegal to own giant African land snails here. So I figured I would share a PSA that the next time you travel, please think twice before you bring in some kind of exotic-looking animal. Ugh. Now that I got that out of the way, please like this video and click the subscribe button and the notification bell. And let me know in the comments below if there's something you want me to talk about aside from disgusting slugs. Stay fabulous, geeks. Good.